Good morning, everybody. Welcome to some bird fun. My name is Sarah Howard, and I'm the Youth and Community Services Manager here for the Danubin Regional Library. And we're happy once again to have Paige Witek here, and she's the Education Coordinator with the Missouri River Bird Observatory that's located in Arrow Rock. And we're excited to have her here as part of our spring break programming. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and she can address them at the end. But now I will magically disappear and spotlight Paige so she can share with us about migration and the sights and sounds of spring birds in Missouri. Welcome. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, I'm going to get my screen sharing because I do have a presentation for you all, of course, so that we can see some pictures and hear some sounds of these magnificent birds. All right. Oh, and hi, Maya. Okay, so let's get started. So just to briefly introduce myself, like Sarah said, my name is Paige Witek, and my title is the Education Coordinator for the Missouri River Bird Observatory. So I get to do one of my favorite things in the world, which is share my knowledge and love of birds with others. And spring is a really exciting time for birds, and it's mainly because of this thing called migration. So let's talk about it. So what is migration? So, and specifically bird migration, because it's a little bit different. So migration in general, in ecology, is defined as the large-scale movement of members of a species to a different environment. So it essentially means lots of different creatures coming together and moving to a different place, right? Now, when we're talking about bird migration, birds migrate from their breeding grounds or where they spend the summer to and from their non-breeding grounds or where they spend the winter. So you'll also hear the non-breeding grounds sometimes referred to as their wintering grounds. Now, in North America, North and South America, the Western Hemisphere, birds will move north in the spring, which is what we're about to witness, and they move south in the fall. And we'll talk more about why that is. So first, I want to show you this graphic. So you see all these little tiny dots on the screen. Those each represent, I believe, a species of bird and where they are in the winter, because you see this date down here, January 1st. And as it plays, you will see the dots move and change color. And the change in color is just to kind of signal like a change in time more than anything else. And you'll see the date kind of go throughout the year. And you'll see them kind of move north in the spring and then move back south in the fall. So let me play that and, pay attention to the distance that some of these birds are moving. So we're getting now into spring more. You can see in May, they really move. Now we're summer, July. Okay, now we're in August. Oh gosh, now we're in September. October, we're really moving back south. And then now we're getting closer to winter. But you see some of those birds are still on the move in December 31st. So I'm going to play it one more time for you all to see, but I just wanted to kind of show that there are different types of bird migration. So there are birds that are permanent residents. So these are birds that don't migrate at all. They're able to find adequate supplies of food all year round, which we'll kind of talk a little bit more about why birds migrate. So these are birds that we see here all the time. So chickadees, cardinals, blue jays, those birds we have here in every season. There are short distant migrants that move only a short distance. So this would be something like higher to lower elevations on a mountainside. So in mountains, even 300 feet can have a big difference in terms of what that environment looks like. So those would be short distant migrants. Medium distant migrants cover distances that span from one to several states. So they say they may spend the winter here in Missouri, but they'll breed up in Wisconsin. Long distance migrants, which are the ones that I think when we hear the term bird migration are the ones that we think about. Those typically move from breeding ranges in the United States and Canada to wintering grounds in Central and South America. And those are going to be the main ones that we talk about today, because I think those are the ones that truly fascinate us, traveling those long distances. So I'm going to play this graphic one more time and just kind of to show you like just the distances that they move. All right. So why migrate? Why spend all that energy traveling? Because make no mistake, it takes a lot of energy to travel, which I think we all know if you've ever traveled a great distance yourself. And, you know, especially if you've walked really far or ran really far, that takes a lot of energy. So why do birds do it? So the simplest kind of way to think about it is that birds are moving from areas of low or decreasing resources to areas of high or increasing resources. So they're moving from areas where their resources are dwindling to areas where they are increasing or where they're high. And the two primary resources that birds are interested in when they're migrating are food, right? Food is a huge motivator for every creature because we need it to get energy. So if you're a bird that mostly eats insects because of, you know, all kinds of things in your evolutionary history, you probably don't want to spend the winter far north. There aren't a whole lot of insects. That would be decreasing resources during the winter. So you're going to move closer to the equator where you can get insects year round. But then I think the confusing part is, or where I got hung up on when I was younger was, well, okay, but then why spend all the energy going back north in the summertime? Why not just stay where there's a huge abundance of insects down near the equator? Well, that's because of resource number 2, which is nesting locations. Or you can think of it as being able to provide a territory while these birds are raising their young. So, you know, and in the summer, like here in Missouri, we are going to have increasing resources. Not just so there's going to be food that's available for those birds, but also they're going to have less competition for those nesting locations. So they're going to move up here to be able to establish that territory and raise their young effectively. So another thing that I think, you know, after you think about why they migrate, I think another question that comes to mind is how do birds navigate and how do they not get lost? How do they find their way? You know, if I were to tell you, you know, okay, now travel to this specific point, you know, in a city far, like in Jefferson City, you know, how would you get there without using, you know, some technology and things like that? How would you find your way? So birds have a lot of different navigation tactics. And there are also things that we can use. So a big one is the sun and or the stars, depending on if they're migrating during the day or at night. A lot of small songbirds tend to migrate at night because it's safer for them. They're less vulnerable to predators. So they're using the stars for navigation. The sun, maybe, so large birds like raptors or predator birds, they might use the sun to help navigate. You know, it moves, you know, across the sky and that can help determine what direction is what. Landmarks, just like you and I, if we were to give directions to someone, you know, we might be like, turn left at the gas station and then go a few feet and turn right at the school or whatever. Now for birds, those landmarks are going to be more things like mountain ranges or rivers. So the Missouri River is a huge landmark that some of the birds use, as well as the Mississippi. They may kind of use this flocking together, so follow the leader style strategy. So learning their migration route from other birds and where to go from other birds. This also helps protect them from predators during migration as there's strength in numbers. And I think one of the most fascinating things that we're still learning about is how birds use Earth's magnetic field to be able to navigate. And we think this is a big clue as to when birds kind of get off track, how they're able to get back on track, and when they get turned around or different things like that, that they're able to reconnect and get back on their migration path. So let me talk a little bit more about the Earth's magnetic field navigation tactic. So think of Earth as the giant magnet. So I'm not going to go into super huge detail about how the magnetic field works. I'm not even sure I could do it justice. It's a lot of physics and stuff involved. But just kind of think of it as a giant magnet, as if there was this bar magnet in the middle at an angle through the center of the Earth. So the north geomagnetic pole actually represents the south pole of Earth's magnetic field. And conversely, the south geomagnetic pole corresponds to the north pole of Earth's magnetic field. Because opposite magnetic poles attract, and the north end of a magnet, like a compass needle, points toward Earth's south magnetic field, i.e. the north geomagnetic pole near the draft. So think about your compass. So your needle always points north. So it has, I forget what is on the tip of those, but they point north because they're attracted, that needle is attracted to that south or the north magnetic pole. Anyway, if that's confusing you, it's just like this invisible field that helps the bird, that the birds can turn into. They have an internal compass that allows them to be able to know which way is north and which way is south, and then therefore east and west. And a lot more research is needed to understand exactly how this works in birds and other animals. So what is clear is that it involves some sort of chemical reactions that interact with these magnetic fields of the Earth. And it is thought that some birds can see Earth's magnetic field in their eyes due to special protein. But like I said, more research is needed to really understand how this works. One example of a bird that they have an idea about how this might work is the bobolink. So bobolinks are here, travel through Missouri in the spring and fall. They breed in the far northern parts of Missouri, but for the most part, we're just going to see them during migration times. And the bobolink has iron oxide bristles in its nasal cavity and in tissues around its olfactory bulb and nerve. So it has metal bristles in its nose that allow it to kind of act like a compass. So it's thought that these bristles can get information and interact with the bird's brain and act like an internal compass to help the bird orient with the magnetic field of the Earth. And like I said, more study is needed to know how this works. This is a female bobolink here, so you can just pay attention to the overall shape. So she's kind of yellowish in color, kind of tan with these brown spots on her back, kind of a medium length tail. She's got this triangle seed-eating beak and kind of like almost like an eye, a line extending from her eye. And then this is the male bobolink. So you can see very much the same shape, beak shape, a little bit different colors. Now here in Missouri, when we see bobolinks, the males only have this plumage or coloration during their breeding season. So most of the time when we see bobolinks here, they kind of look more like the female because that's also their non-breeding plumage or somewhere in between the two. So they're really cool birds. And I want to show you this graphic of bobolinks because they also travel a great distance. So this ability to tune into the Earth's magnetic field is really important for them. So this map shows what we call abundance. So how many bobolinks are in a certain area at a certain time of year. So the more purple it is, the higher concentration of bobolinks. And as it plays, you're going to see them move. And you're going to see this bar move to show the different months throughout the year. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and so on. And so it's going to show and you're going to see them move. And for a while, it's going to look like the birds just like completely disappear off the map. But obviously they didn't vanish because we see them appear later. So this data is collected by people just like you through something called EBER that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology puts together. It's a community science project. So it's just ordinary people going out and recording what birds they see and hear in a certain place. And all this data from all over the world gets compiled. But there are gaps in our knowledge because there's not people e-birding in every area of the world. So for the bobolink, there's still some mystery to the migration path it takes, which I think is pretty cool. So without further ado, let me play the graphic. I apologize if it's a little laggy. So where do they go?
Hey, Paige, can you move the black square off of your screen? I don't know if you can tell. I think the chat box might be covering up some of your information. Yep, there you go.
That better?
Thanks, that's much better. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't know why Zoom.
It's just being mean to us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes it does that, sometimes it doesn't.
Now it's back.
Oh, oop.
Oh, now it's gone. I think we're
Okay.
good now. We'll see.
Oop. Okay, let me play this one
Okay.
more time then, so people don't have that distraction. So you can see they're traveling quite far. So let's talk about some more spring migrants in Missouri. So now that we know kind of what migration is, how it works, and let me see if I can fix something else here.
Oh, your square is back.
Sorry.
Now
Is there a black bar at the top of the screen?
Yes, it's your controls. Yep.
I don't know why that's not.
And now the square's back for some reason.
What?
It's just being weird.
Not on my screen. Oh, I see. Oh, it's because I'm looking at the. Okay, here we go.
Then there's now there's a big bar in the middle. Nope,
Is
now
it
it's
gone
back.
now?
Yes, thank you so much.
So apparently everything that's popping up on my screen is showing for you also. I apologize.
Fun.
So spring migrants in Missouri. So now I want to talk about only 5 birds because we don't have a whole lot of time and I don't want to overwhelm everybody. But these 5 birds you will soon be able to find here in Missouri, come a little further into spring and will be very common or somewhat common in the summertime. These are also all birds that can be found in a forest habitat, because I'm making an assumption that this is probably the easiest habitat type for everyone to access, are those kind of woodsy areas, other than, maybe just like general city or backyard areas. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the summer tanager. So the summer tanager will travel to us from parts of Mexico, Central and South America. So this map here is what we call a range map. So this shows where the summer tanager can be found at certain times of the year. With this particular range map, the blue shows where you can find it in the winter time. The yellow is during migration. So again, spring and fall. And the orangish color is during the summertime. So you can see here in Missouri, we can see the summer tanager during the summer. They prefer open woodland habitat, so that's where you can find them. They mainly eat insects, which is a theme I think you'll see from the rest of the birds. They make a cup nest on tree branches. The males are identified by this bright red plumage. So if you see a bright red bird in the summer, don't necessarily assume it's a cardinal. It probably is a cardinal, but it might be a summer tanager. And I'll talk about a little bit of those differences. So cardinals have that kind of black mask on their face. If you look at a picture of a cardinal, and their beak is bright orange, whereas the summer tanager has this different colored beak. The female summer tanagers, and I'll show a picture of them in a second, have yellowish plumage or feathers. And the immature males can be kind of in between. So they kind of look patchy. So they're slowly growing their red feathers. And I'll show a picture of that as well. But both have a pale horn colored bill. So which is a little bit different shape than a cardinal's as well. A cardinal's is going to be a little bit more thick, more triangle-like. And like I said, bright orange instead of this pale color. So these are the different colorations of a summer tanager. So this is the female here. So she's more yellowish in color. And this is the immature up here. So you can kind of see those patches of red along with that yellow. And then of course the male is that bright red again. So you would think that a bright red bird would be easy to spot in a tree. However, most of the time I hear summer tanagers way before I see them, because even though they're bright red, they are very good at hiding in the leaves of trees. And so when they sing, the males sing a series of kind of slurred whistles. They're separated by these short pauses. And if you're familiar with the sound of the American robin, it's quite similar to that, but a little bit shorter. And it usually lasts about 2 to 4 seconds. But what I hear most often is their call, which are given by both the males and the females. And it's kind of this clicking pit, tick, tuck, pit, tick, tuck, tick, tuck, tick, tuck, kind of like that. And they'll add extra syllables or tucks or ticks if they're agitated. And that's what I hear the most often. So hopefully I'm going to turn my volume up. So this is what they sound like. And the song is at the beginning of this recording and the call is at the end.
Summer Tanager.
This is what I hear. All right, so that's the summer tanager. So you may see those come later, kind of mid-April, later April, early May. All right, the indigo bunting. So this may be one that you've seen in the past, and you may not have known what it was. Indigo buntings are traveling from parts of Mexico and Central America. So this is what their range map. So in the winter, they're kind of in Mexico, areas of Central America, and kind of Cuba and some of those other islands. And then in the summer, we see them here in Missouri. They migrate at night using the stars for guidance. And I bring that up specifically for indigo buntings because there was actually a study done that demonstrated this process in the late 1960s. And I think it's really interesting how they studied this. So they studied captive indigo buntings in a planetarium, which if you're unfamiliar is kind of like almost a theater that like projects the night sky onto the ceiling, and they kind of can show different stars and things like that. So they used this thing that kind of teaches us about stars and stuff, but they put captive indigo buntings under a planetarium and then under the natural night sky. And they found out that the birds possess an internal clock that enables them to continually like adjust their angle of orientation to a star, even as that star moves through the night sky, which I think is really cool. They prefer open woodland habitat, but you can see them in some backyards as well. They mainly eat insects. They make a cup nest in a shrub or like a thick bush. The males have this overall bright blue plumage, so bright blue feathers. The females are all brown, but they're the same shape. They have the same beak shape, that kind of triangle shaped beak. And yeah, so they're very similar looking. They're just brown instead of blue. And they're very easy they hide really well. So the females are a lot harder to find, but they're just as interesting. And they're smaller in size compared to like what you might typically think of as a sparrow. So here's some pictures. So that's the female there. So you can see she's a very similar shape to the male, or he's a very similar shape to her, but he has that bright blue plumage. And again, the immature indigo buntings kind of have both. So they're they have these like blue patches of that overall brown color. So indigo buntings have a very like lively, unique kind of song. It's very like sharp, clear, high-pitched notes that last about 2 seconds. They will sing as many as 200 songs per hour at dawn and keeping a pace of about one per minute for the rest of the day. So they sing a lot. Their notes or phrases are often repeated in pairs. So you'll hear them go kind of what, where, see it. And they kind of do that for about 2 seconds. So that pattern is recognizable, although like the precise tune and the notes that they sing will vary from place to place, because young indigo buntings learn their songs from the males near where they settle to breed. And this leads to kind of like song neighborhoods in which all the males nearby sing songs that are similar to each other, but maybe completely different than ones that are like a few hundred yards away, which I think is really interesting. So here's what they sound like. So that's the indigo bunting. So you might see or hear them come pretty soon. Another one of my favorite birds that comes back is the eastern wood pewee. And this is mostly more due to the sound they make, but they're also very cute to watch. So these birds travel from South America. So they probably travel one of the longest distance of the birds that we talk about so far. So this is their range map. So they really, they spend the winter in that South America area, then travel through Central America and spend the summer here to breed. They prefer forest habitats, again, which you can kind of guess by that name, wood pewee. Again, they eat mostly insects. They make a cup nest on high tree branches. And they are medium-sized flycatchers. So flycatchers are a group of birds that are notorious for being difficult to identify one from another. So these birds are kind of medium-sized. So they're not as large as some other flycatchers, but they're bigger than others. They're grayer overall with longer wings than other flycatchers. But in general, they're one of the more common ones, along with the eastern phoebe that we'll see here at that time of year. So they have stronger, what we call wing bars than an eastern phoebe. So those are these white lines here on the wings. So if you don't see those, you may be looking at a phoebe instead of an eastern wood pewee. So like I said, they're kind of difficult to distinguish by sight, but they give an unmistakable slurred call that's kind of sounds like pee-o-wee, which is why they're called peewees. And I often just love the contrast of some birds during the summer, because you might hear like a blue jay and it's just like wah, 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 being kind of loud. And then there's just the pee-wee and it's like pretty cute. So here's what that sounds like. Okay. Oh. So kind of that pee-wee, pee-wee. And I have a short video, and then I think we'll probably answer questions because I know we're getting close to the end of time. So here we go. So that was the eastern wood pewee. So that's another one that we will see sometimes in the spring. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now. I'm bummed that we didn't get to the other two birds, but those are the harder ones to identify. I definitely covered the more common ones first. So look for those summer tanagers, those indigo buntings, and the eastern wood pewee next time you're outside kind of later in the month. And you might be like, oh, that's the bird that she was talking about. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat.
Yay!
Do we have any questions so far, Sarah?
We do. One of the questions is, when trees lose their leaves, do birds move because nests are seen by predators?
Oh, so that's another, I like what you're thinking about. So most birds that are nesting, so when trees don't have their leaves is not when birds are nesting, right? So when trees lose their leaves, it's during the winter time, which is not when birds are raising their young. So agreed, their nests are more exposed, right? And that might be part of why that is. So as well as, decreased resources, because even the birds that spend the winter here, they don't have, they may struggle to get food a little bit more than they do in the summertime. So yeah, so they do move. They might migrate somewhere else, or choose shelters and like other thick bushes and different things like that. Or inside tree cavities and different things like that. So yeah, good thinking though. You're like, wait, aren't those nests like super visible when the leaves are gone? Yeah, they are.
Another question was, do summer tanagers have a larger beak?
A larger beak than other birds, or?
I don't know. It just
Yeah,
says, do summer tanagers have a
if you
larger
could
beak?
clarify, I'm assuming cardinals, because I was comparing those two, but let me know if I'm wrong, just to make sure I understand your question. So cardinals, I would say, have a bit larger beak when you, especially if you're just like glancing at the bird. Cardinals, it covers like their beak, like is like a lot of their face. Like I'm going like this because I feel like their beak is like pretty wide compared to a summer tanager's. I think that picture may be a little deceptive as to how big the summer tanager beak looks. It's thicker than most birds, but it's kind of almost like blue jay thickness. It's a different color than the blue jays, but yeah, it's oh yeah, so clarified than the cardinals. So yeah, the cardinals have a bigger beak, but the bigger clue is really that color difference. So cardinals have the bright orange, and the summer tanagers have that pale, like horn looking beak.
Great. Another question is, let's see, has light pollution impacted the birds who migrate at night?
That is a fantastic question. And yes, it does. So a lot of light pollution can be very disorienting to birds. And I think we all can kind of relate to that a little bit. If you're in a really dark room and then you turn on a light, like, do you remember, like I'm sure most of us are like flinching thinking about that. Or someone shines a bright light in your face. So that can be very disorienting for the bird. So that's why there's a lot of campaigns called Lights Out, that work with large cities to turn off the lights, like unnecessary lights during times of migration, so that those birds can migrate safely. So great question. Thank you for asking.
Another one is, what is considered an open woodland?
Oh, great question. These are terms that biologists use that are like not straightforward. So thank you for asking for clarification on that. So there's different types of forests. So there's forests that are really thick. They've got lots of understory. There's lots of bushes and medium trees, and lots of trees more packed closely together. I would consider an open woodland. Trees are more sparse. They're not as close together. They're farther apart, and there's not a lot of understory growth. So almost kind of like what you might think of in like a city park, where, but instead of like grass, there's like other forest plants, and the trees are overall bigger. So there's like, and maybe the trees are a little bit closer together, right? So there's still, it's all shaded, but the trees are farther apart, and there's not a lot of understory growth. Is like open woodland. So, so like a woodland versus a forest, I would say woodland is like, it's mostly dominated by trees and there's very little other plants there, I guess. There still are, but they're not as like, there's not like thick bushes underneath the trees and stuff like that.
Awesome. A peewee question. The eastern wood peewee looked like it had a little bit of yellow on the chest. Is that correct? In the movie.
It could have, let's see, phoebe or eastern wood peewees. Like some flycatchers have like a little bit of yellow fading on their chest. I don't think the peewee has a whole lot. It sometimes can look like that. So that's why colors are tricky with birds, because depending on the lighting, birds can look a little bit differently. But in general, I would see the eastern wood peewee doesn't really have a lot of yellow. The eastern phoebe can have some yellow, particularly when we first see it in the spring and fall. And then they kind of like fade a little bit during the summertime, I feel like. But yeah, flycatcher is real difficult by sight. If you're a beginner, I do not recommend worrying about that. But if you hear that POE and you see the bird going POE, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's an eastern wood POE.
Do we know if generations migrate to the same area each year?
So that's a little bit of studies that are continuing, but there is a lot of evidence so far that individuals will go to the same spot. And I think this is probably something you may have witnessed yourself. So like a eastern phoebe is a great example of that. So the one I was comparing that kind of looks like the wood peewee. I have an eastern phoebe that comes back every year, and just, the other day she came back right to the same spot to start building her nest right above this door frame that I have. Some of you may experience that with barn swallows. They may come back and nest, maybe in a spot you don't enjoy that much year after year. So they do come to the same areas for sure. Eagles use the same nest and build off of their nest every year. So as far as wintering grounds, I don't know if they're as picky, but for the summer for sure.
We have a couple shout outs for the Audubon app. We also have a shout out that someone's favorite book is Birds of Missouri Field Guide by Stan. I'm going to get the name wrong. Tekiela, Tekiela. The other few questions we have, do birds travel when it's raining?
Oh,
where do birds go when it rains?
They probably don't travel as far or as intensely. But I would think that they're still kind of on the move. Like if you look out, like I'm looking outside right now, birds are still flying around even if it's raining. If it's pouring rain, no, they're probably not migrating, because that would be very difficult to fly. And if water gets onto their skin, it can make them really cold and vulnerable. I've heard birds like they'll migrate during like a hurricane and stuff, like some insane stuff like that. But when there are huge like hurricanes and weather events, they tend to come down. And that's why some of those islands are some like kind of important stopover sites for a lot of birds for that exact reason.
When they're flying, we have a question about dust in the air. Do birds have a filter or some sort of a way to deal with all the things that might be around harvest time? Can they get dust?
Yeah, so I don't know I'd have to look into things about if they have anything internal that helps prevent dust. But like us, so our own mechanism is like we have nose hairs, right? And that helps prevent dust from getting in. And that's why when we have allergies, like it's your nose, it's all stuffy and you're like, your nose is trying to be like, get this stuff out. So birds don't necessarily have that same process, but they have feathers that kind of act like more like whiskers maybe, but also kind of the feathers around their nostrils that kind of prevent dust and particles from coming in through their nose. But just like our mouths, their beaks, I'm not aware of anything that like would necessarily prevent that as much. But they may get dust in their lungs, but they probably, actually, you know what, that's a great question, because I assume they cough but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, we need some recordings of birds coughing. Um, we've got a couple final questions here. What happens when birds do not migrate? And could they're talking about adopting daylight savings time year round. That's been a discussion in the news lately. Would that impact birds' migration?
Oh, so what, daylight savings time is something humans have invented, right? So the birds aren't using those same cues. Now, like kind of why we have daylight savings time, right, is to create like when we like to do stuff at certain times of the day. So we want those times to match up when the sun is out. So that's why we kind of shift those timings. Birds are also want the same thing, right? They're doing things when the sun is out or not out. So when the sun is, as it fades, or like it rises and sets at different times of the day. The summer, there's longer days. The winter, there's shorter days. And birds do tune into those clues when they're like, to know when it's time to migrate. So when the days are getting shorter, they know winter is approaching and they need to start going to where their food sources is down south, and the opposite to come back north. So when birds don't migrate, so like if a bird has limited so if it's a bird that migrates and it doesn't migrate, it might run out of resources in that area, and yeah, probably wouldn't do so hot. So migration is very important for those birds. Now, there's a lot of evidence that, birds change how far they might go south in the wintertime, based on seasonal and yearly weather patterns. And they might go farther north or less far north. And so there's still a whole lot of mystery that surrounds bird migration and why they go to certain areas and why they don't. Or different things like that. So these are awesome questions, but unfortunately I can't answer them super well because there's still so much we don't know and so much change and variation with it all.
And that's exciting to know too, that there's still so much to learn. That's kind of fun. The final couple questions is there a link to the migration videos that you shared? Like, did those come from Cornell, etc.? And what bird app, or do you know of a bird app that has a radar map for folks?
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So I'd say great place to go in general for resources is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and everything that they put out. So a big website I go to is allaboutbirds.org. The maps that I showed. So the one with the little dots, I'm not sure if it is still on the eBird website. So that's just ebird.org. But you can, the one that I showed of the Bobolink, that abundance map, you can still find on ebird.org. I think you go to science and you can go and you can click and find the abundance maps for different species. And the radar maps, there's a website called Birdcast, and I believe it's also birdcast.org. So birdcast. And that can show you if there's movement in your area and in any particular night. So that's really cool to watch during migration. Allaboutbirds.org is a good one. Birdcast and ebird.org.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Paige. This has been very enlightening. There's always so much. And for folks out there, we are recording this, so it will be up on our website in a few days for a while. If you know someone that missed it and wanted to come, you can let them know, or if you want to revisit. We're hoping to have Paige back in person later on in the summer, and if not, we will do a Zoom again. So thanks everybody for coming, and we hope to see you around. Thanks, Paige.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for listening and your fantastic questions.